Welcome to the Photography BB Action Hero Action for Photoshop. As part of our Artistry 2 Portrait Art Actions collection, we just had to include a dynamic action hero style effect, which is going to provide you with hours of fun and outstanding results on everything from photographs of sports, Halloween costumes, social media profiles, cinematic portraits, your children, and so many more. This action was actually inspired by one of the movie posters for the movie Tropic Thunder, where the main characters can be seen posed in front of a giant fireball-style explosion with particles flying out everywhere in just a really cool action hero type of effect. So that's where the inspiration for this action set came from. So let's just dive in and have some fun. So open up the Actions panel and toggle open the Photography BB Action Hero set. Now there are three actions in this set. The first is step 1, select focus, where you'll brush over the main subject in your photograph to select them. Then you have two options for running step 2, which include a small blast explosion or a huge explosion version for those epic portrait poses that require a maximum level of heroism. So I'm going to use this image here of this fine gentleman who certainly looks like he could be an action hero. So let's click on the Step 1 Select Focus action and click Play at the bottom of the Actions panel. The dialog pops up and tells us to paint over the main subject on the main focus area layer, and then to run Step 2 once we've done that. So I'll click Stop to close this dialog. Now there are a few ways to do this. You can use the brush, which is automatically selected for you by default, and simply paint over the subject, making sure to be as accurate as possible. You can change the size of the brush quickly by using the square bracket keys on the keyboard to increase or decrease the brush size. And you'll notice that we're painting on the main focus area layer, which allows you to use the eraser tool to erase your brushing if you make any mistakes. So I actually prefer to select my subject using the quick selection tool. So let me undo this so I can start over and demonstrate how that works. So we can select the quick selection tool by pressing W on the keyboard, or Shift W if it chooses the magic wand, or you can go over to the toolbar and select the quick selection tool. And then to use this method, you first need to click on the background layer, where we're going to make the selection of our main subject. Now we make the selection on the background layer because that's currently the only layer with actual pixels on it. So click the background layer if you're using this method. And then just paint over the area that you want to select. And you can also increase or decrease the size of this tool using the square bracket keys as well. You can even release the mouse button and press it again to continue adding to your selection. Or if you select something outside of the main subject area by accident, you can hold down the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC and paint to subtract areas from your selection. So let's finish up selecting my main subject here using this method, and actually I'm going to leave out part of the subject to show you how you can fix that if you miss a spot by mistake. So with the selection made, now we click on the main focus area layer and we fill it with the paint color that we would have been using if we were using the brush tool instead. So to do this quickly, press Shift Delete and change the drop down to foreground color and click OK. Now in this example, you can see that I missed part of my subject, so that's easy to fix. Just click back on the background layer again and continue making your selection of the missed areas, and then go back to the main focus area layer and press Shift Delete again and OK to fill in the remaining area. Now next it's time to run the effect by choosing one of the options for step 2. Now I think this gentleman would benefit from the huge blast effect, so I'll click on that version of step 2 and then click play. Now depending on the speed and configuration of your computer, the action may take a few minutes to complete. Okay, so the effect is complete, and you can close this dialog box here, and then we have several options to explore for further customization. So let's actually close the Actions panel out of the way as well, like this. Okay, and moving over to the Layers palette, there are a number of layer groups here that allow you to further customize the effect to your liking. So the first group here contains 6 of our brand new color filters, and to apply any of these to your image, toggle open the layer group and turn on the visibility of any of the subgroups here like this, and you can change the color effects on your image. Okay, so for this one, I actually like the default best here, so I'm going to keep the color filters off in this case. And let's just toggle that group closed, and we can move on to the next layer group, which contains all of these blast particles that we see here in the image. So when we toggle this group open, you can see there are a lot of particle layers. So the first two contain the very fine dust particles in the image. There's light dust and there's dark dust. I'll zoom in to 100% view here. And as I toggle the visibility of the light dust layer on and off, you can see the particles in the image here that we're affecting. So these kind of dust streaks in white here. And the dark dust layer acts in a similar way, where you can see the effect of turning that layer's visibility on and off here, just around the main subject. So these dust layers can be left either on or have their visibilities turned off, or you can even reduce their strength by lowering the opacity of either of these layers. So I like the way they look here, so I'm going to leave them turned on. And I'm going to zoom back out again to 33% here so we can get a good full view. And now the next 10 layers are actually 5 levels of Blast Rocks effect, each with their own color fill layer to allow you to control the color of each of these layers. So if we look at just one, the top group here, Blast Rocks 5, this is the layer that contains the actual rock shapes, and then the layer just above it, Tone Rocks 5, is the color fill layer where we can adjust the color of those rocks. So first, you can see the content of the Blast Rocks 5 layer as I toggle the visibility on and off. And now let's have a look at changing the color first before we get into the other options that we have for each of these layers. So to change the color of these rocks, all we need to do is double click on the color swatch on the Tone Rocks 5 layer and pick a new color from the color picker. So let's make them a bright green just for the sake of demonstration. So now you can see when I toggle the visibility of the Blast Rocks 5 layer, not the tone layer, we have our green rocks in the scene. Now we have more control over these effects too. If you click on the little layer effects toggle over on the far right side of the Blast Rocks 5 layer, we have some layer styles as well as a smart filter effect. Now for this layer we have a bevel emboss layer style applied to give more of a three-dimensional shape to the rocks on this layer. So let's zoom in again to 100% to have a look. So as you can see, with this bevel style turned on, the rocks appear to have a bit of an edge depth to them right here. But if I toggle the visibility of the layer style, not the actual layer, just the style, on and off, that depth effect disappears and the rock appears to be more like a flat shape. So now there's also a bit of blur here, which is making this effect less noticeable. So let's turn off the radial blur filter just for a moment by clicking on the visibility eyeball icon for the smart filter on this layer in the layers palette here. And now if I go back and I toggle the bevel layer style back on, you can see the depth effect more clearly now. You can see that there. So we have these controls for each of the Blast Rocks layers. Each one has its own bevel effect coupled with a radial blur smart filter. And because it's a smart filter, you can double click on the radial blur filter right in the layers palette here to make changes to the amount of blur. Now this does take some time to process, so we won't do it now, but just know that the option is available to you. And of course, we also have control over the color of these rocks using the layer above each rock layer, in this case the Tone Rocks 5 as we looked at. So all 5 Blast Rocks layers have these controls available. Now we've set the defaults to look great with most images, but just know that you have all the flexibility in the world to experiment with results that will best suit your image. So have a lot of fun with these here. Okay, and we can close up this group now. And next we have the Explosion Power group, and this group can be toggled open to make the adjustments to these light streaks that we see radiating out from the main blast. So you can see we have 3 blast highlights layers, And you can control their individual opacities and or their visibilities, and you can double click on any of the color swatches to make changes to the color of the individual light streaks. So for example, if I double click on the reddish swatch here, I can change that to something dramatically different, like blue. And you can see the effect that it has on the light streaks. Okay, I'll click cancel. Okay. So next we have a couple of explosion power layers that are turned off by default. And these can be turned on by toggling their visibility on to give the explosion a little bit more prominence if you would like. So again, have fun playing around with these layers for different effects as well. And we can close up this layer group. And we'll move on to the subject rim lighting group, where we can open up this group here and we can start making custom adjustments if necessary. And the first layer here controls the color tone of the bright rim lighting highlights. And you can double click the color swatch to make changes to this tone if you would like. But because it's an explosion, yellow is a pretty good color to start with. So the remaining rim lighting layers simply control the strength of the rim lighting areas. And you can play around with these if you feel that any parts of the rim lighting are too intense. And you can reduce their opacity or their layer visibilities as well. Also, if you like, you can turn on and off the visibility of the Add More Glow layer to give your subject even more of a background glow effect. So if you close up this layer group and you find that you'd still like to make changes to the strength of this particular effect, you can even reduce the opacity of the entire layer group. But for this one, it looks pretty good, so we'll leave it at 100%. Now the next group controls the look of our main subject here. So let's toggle this open and we'll see we have some options. So the first is the color restore layer, which will help to bring back some of the original color tones of the main subject before this blast effect. Now naturally, we've toned the subject by default to match the tones of the explosion blast. But if you would like to bring back any of the original tones, you can simply increase the opacity of this layer, like that, or you can decrease it further if that suits your image better. So this next layer controls the amount of this sort of illustrated or HDR effect. And you can turn the visibility on or off, or reduce the opacity to change the strength of this effect. Now you can also double click on the Gaussian Blur Smart Filter and make adjustments to the effect this way. So double clicking brings up the dialog box. And as you increase the radius, you're effectively adding more contrast to this effect. And as you decrease the radius, you flatten the effect. So you can click OK when you have something that you like for your subject. Now the next layer adds this sort of grungy, gritty effect. And again, you can control it similarly to the illustrated effect layer by adjusting the visibility, opacity level, or by double-clicking the high-pass smart filter to make adjustments there as well. So we'll leave the default settings as it is, since it gives our subject a look that really suits this image nicely. And lastly, if you would like to adjust the color tone that's been applied to the subject, you can actually click on the color swatch of this bottom layer, Adjust Subject Color, and change it to something else. And you'll see now that this only affects the color tones of the subject, not the entire image. So for now, we'll click it open and just show you an example here and see how that affects just the main subject. But we're going to leave it a default as it is, so I'll click cancel and close up the group here. And now our final group contains the layers for the fireball background. So toggling this open, we have a few layers to play around with if you like. And the first controls the toning, and like the other color tone layers in this action, you can simply double click the color swatch to make any color adjustments to the background. Like that, and we'll just click cancel on that. Now the hot smoke layer contains the white smoke effect, and as you increase the opacity here, you'll see the effect of this white smoke, or you can decrease it for less of a smoky effect. And the fire screen layer controls the amount of the yellowish fire parts of the explosion. And you can again adjust the opacity to make any changes to suit your needs. Now the fireball and the black background layers, they can be adjusted, but since this effect is all about the actual fireball, we think the default setting is pretty sweet. So we'll just leave that alone. And that actually completes the effect of our brand new Action Hero action. So I hope you have a lot of fun, especially on photographs of your kids in costumes or playing sports. This is going to look great. So thank you again for checking out our Artistry 2 Action Hero action. Enjoy! On behalf of myself and everyone here at Photography BB, thank you for checking out our brand new Artistry 2 actions for Photoshop. We hope you have hours of fun creating stunning works of art with these, and I personally look forward to seeing everything you create using these actions.